Okay. Okay, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Overcome Become podcast. With me, as always, my co-host, Humberto Kaufman. And today, we have a very classy man from out east, Blake Course. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing awesome, guys. Really excited to get on here. But I did a podcast with Joe Seaman and Jay just the other day. So I know Humberto, you saw that, and I was like, I knew you guys had been doing this for a while. So this is something I want to do more of, honestly, is to kind of get out and I love just having these conversations. Like it's just right in the bodybuilding niche, and whether how many people watch doesn't really matter to me. It's just nice to have a conversation with some different people about the sport and about what's going on in bodybuilding.
Yeah, what I like about this type of conversations too is that it's different than, let's say, what you would put perhaps on your stories or the content. Like this conversation, some other topics, the tone is a little bit different. Some topics may come up, and we can kind of just build on each other's points to kind of, because the people that are following you, of course, are interested in a wide variety of topics regarding your prep and how you do things and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So I think having these conversations is important for people to kind of get into the mindset of an athlete, whether it's an amateur or a pro. So yeah, we're very excited to have you today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Pleasure, guys. Pleasure.
Blake, before we even get started, man, of course, from myself and Humberto, we just want to say congratulations on the pregnancy. Photos are very awesome. We're very happy for the two of you. And also congratulations on signing with HD Muscle. That's huge, man.
Yeah, thank you guys. It's been honestly, I just feel like with the whole COVID thing, so many things got bottled up, and now it's just all right, I'm getting married. We're getting married in 3 weeks too. So I got that coming up. I got the show coming up in 5 weeks. We're gonna have a baby in February of 2022. We just sold our house. So it's literally things have opened up, and it's just gone crazy because everything's been backlogged for so long. I'm tired of living in a cave. I want to do some stuff. So we're definitely doing those things, and yeah, we couldn't be more excited to do it. It's busy, but it's just the way life is, right?
So you're getting married 2 weeks out from your show?
Yeah, I know. I knew you were gonna go there with that. And
how could we not, Blake? That's insane.
It's one of those things where so the way that this worked out, basically, I'll just give you a quick rundown. Is I was gonna do North Americans, which is it was supposed to be 3 days before my wedding, which again was a pretty dumb idea, but it was a little bit better, I thought, because I would get the competition out of the way, have some food, relax, get married, and then just have some time to myself. But just with the border and the way that travel is right now, the US is getting kind of crazier and crazier, even with all this stuff going on in the Middle East, sadly. So I had this overwhelming, I guess, stress of getting down there and then getting stuck or something, right? If I get stuck down there, I got all this money in the wedding, and I'm letting so many people down, including my wife. So I can't be doing that kind of thing. But I talked to Patrick Tour is my coach, and I just told him there's a show that's 2 weeks after. I know it's obviously not ideal, but would we be able to get maybe a little bit in better shape and then have that day as a total reset? So basically he's giving me the go ahead to just I'm not I've been doing this long enough where I'm not gonna eat 20,000 calories on my wedding day. I'm gonna have some good food, maybe have a couple drinks, enjoy myself, and then get right back on the plane the next day. And if it was a few days, it would really, really mess things up. But 2 weeks, I think you guys can agree that once the water comes off, get back on track, it's just gonna be a little, it'd be a nice little break, to be honest.
Well, it's perspective Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Humberto.
Sorry. I was going to say, we keep hearing these horror stories from people going to the States and then coming back, and just all these hurdles and obstacles that they have to overcome. So I can completely see where you're coming from. And the other thing regarding the planning, I can totally see, and I would assume that a little bit of the timing and timeline had to do with the topic of the wedding dress, because, you want to have the wedding at a point in which, things are not too big. You know what I mean? That's one thing that we were kind of talking about, because we were planning on getting married last year as well, my wife and I. Mm-hmm. And because of COVID, obviously we had to cancel that. Then we
Yeah.
postponed it to this year. Things were still uncertain. So we were like, you know what? Let's just focus on the other family goals, which were getting
Yeah.
pregnant as well, because we didn't want to have to stress about that a little bit, right? So yeah, the whole COVID scenario situation and competing and family life and everything has been definitely quite a ride over the last year and a half. So yeah, it's quite interesting.
Yeah, congratulations to you and your wife as well on that.
Thank you.
That's massive, man. Yeah, it's awesome.
Thank you,
Man,
man.
everybody's having kids out here. Every single person.
Yeah, it's like
It's like
so much for the test shutting you down. Eh? I was mid cycle when it all happened. So like this obviously like it's funny. Like I was talking to quite a few people and they were like, because that was always a concern of mine. Obviously, I think anybody that has a family and wants to start a family, like
Mhm.
when they get into this, they worry about those kinds of things. And it was a huge concern of mine, obviously. But yeah, it was like something where initially we were going to plan just to like, I was going to come off, have a big break after these shows, and that was when it was going to happen. But I was blessed to have it happen when it did, and yeah, I mean, whenever you can't plan these things really, honestly. It's like, well, when it happens, and we're excited, so it's all good.
So, question for you: do you normally, like, once you're done with a competition,
Mhm.
do you normally do you taper off? Do you come off fully? Is it how long do you come off? If you do you do a bridging type of approach? What do you normally do?
So I've done every one of those things that you just mentioned.
Okay.
When I first started, I would PCT every time, come off completely, and like literally like turn into a bag of milk. Like I would look like a sack of potatoes within like 10 weeks, and like I'd be like starting fresh again because like I think at the beginning I didn't have enough like muscle maturity to like keep a good look if I wasn't like running stuff. So that was like hard mentally, obviously, but like at the same time,
Mhm.
it was probably a good break for the body. Then I went from that to like cruising between cycles, like low, like 150. And I had good success with that too. But then when I started with Pat, he just said like, at the end of well, the show that didn't happen last year, that was ridiculous. But it got canceled, and then he just said like it was a bit of a taper. Like I think it was like 3 weeks, and then I was off of everything. And then I
Mhm.
stayed off of everything for like 10 weeks total. But like because I was so disciplined with like the training, it wasn't as intense and my food was like all on point. I didn't like really lose much of anything. Like if anything, like the little extra food, like I kind of filled out. And when I started back up, I got a lot of really good results. So I've done both. I have clients too, and at the end of the day, it's just a personal decision, and people can
Mhm.
see it both ways of why you would do one over the other. But I think at this point, unless you're doing like tons of shows in the year, if you have time, like PCT, come off, get everything like detox, get healthy, and then fire it back up. Yeah.
Yeah, I
that
think a
makes
lot
sense.
of people, what they end up doing is because they're coming off or they tapering or whatever the case may be, I think mentally more than anything, it affects them to the point in
Yeah.
which they're like, well, I'm not gonna be able to grow as much. I'm not going to be as strong. I'm not gonna look the same. So that almost like starts to affect the way they follow everything else, nutrition including. So it's almost like a snowball effect that had they remain disciplined with the nutrition as you did, for example, they would have realized, oh, this isn't really that bad. Maybe I dropped a couple pounds. Maybe my strength went down a little bit, but not to the point where it could if you completely let go of everything
Hmm.
else.
I think there's a lot of external factors that put pressure on people to stay on too. Like there's a lot of like people that don't compete, but like do phenomenal stuff on like social media where they're putting out a ton of content. And like the minute they don't look like hard as nails, like people don't really care. Right. So it's a sad reality that way. But I think that like keeps people like, okay, if I'm not on, I'm not going to A, make money and B, like grow my audience. So there's some external factors there. For me, it's always just been about competing. Like when I started, I was like, if I'm not getting better, like I'm done kind of thing. So it was like, I would just, I'm doing whatever it takes to like get better as a bodybuilder versus like feeling pressure to like look a certain way at the gym or like, have to feel like I'm like huge all the time. And it's a nice feeling, I guess, but I don't care enough, I think, at this point where like I'm gonna sacrifice my health to look a certain way year round.
You know what? I'm very similar to that, to a point in which I don't think I would even feel as motivated to be on shape, even for a photo shoot. For me, it's just all about the stitching and that's it. For a photo shoot, I know, you're documenting your progress or whatever, but for me, it's just not deep enough of a, because competing and getting to that mindset, it's such an intense and it's such a hard sport, and it just involves so much out of you that, to me, it is the stage what makes me, or ultimately brings the most out of it in me. Whereas everything else, just looking good for the beach or even a photo shoot, for me, in my personal case, it's just not like softer in the off season. I'm fine. Like I'm happier. I have a little bit more energy. My brain functions better. I can do a lot more things, right? But yeah, I agree with that completely. I wanted to touch on the competitive aspect. When you and I talked last year, I think you were mentioning that you were definitely under the weight cap. What's the weight cap for you for your height?
So I'm the exact same height as Chris Bumstead. I'm like just over 6 feet tall. So I think he's 6.5 inch. I'm like right there exactly. So it's 220 as an amateur, 230 as a pro.
From what I remember when we were talking last time, you were about 5 to 10 pounds. You were going to end up like 5, maybe 10 pounds under the weight cap. And it looks like this year you've definitely come along to the point in which you might be closer to the weight cap.
I've been like inching for years, man. Like when I first started, like I was like 190 pounds. So like to get, 30 pounds of muscle is like, I've always been like a skinny kid growing up. I was, in no means had like a mesomorph type body. It was always very slim. So I have no issue, like, well, I shouldn't say I have no issue dieting, but the dieting side like comes easier to me than like putting on like big, when you think about 220 on stage, like go back like, maybe 30 years, like we're talking like some of the biggest open bodybuilders are 220. And I think nowadays, like some of the guys that are like 240, 250, like a lot of people exaggerate their weights too. It's a funny thing because I don't think people realize like it's a weird thing because classic physique is weight and height, right? And I think that for the shorter guys, like especially when you're like 5'5", 5'6", like it's so like those guys have to suffer so hard because the cutoff is so low. I mean, it's like 160, 170 pounds. So it's kind of a strange thing. And I really do think that it benefits in the long term, the taller guys. And that's why you see Bumstead stand out so much, is because he's massive when he's on stage. Like he's 230 pounds. He won his card as an open bodybuilder, North Americans. And that's, what kind of got him going. And he's probably put size on from there to compete in classic. So I think that, obviously classic, it comes down to the shape and everything. But if you have to be you have to be big at that like pro level. And to get back to your point about the weight, like I'm 217, 218 right now. So I'm already 3 pounds under my cutoff. It's never been an issue for me. I wish I was heavier, but again, it doesn't really matter. They don't have a scale on stage type thing. So I think it's still going to take me a year or two to get to like dying to hit 220 kind of thing. But I'd be really, really happy this year I could come in like 212, 213.
It'll definitely be exciting either way, that's for sure. I know for me, being able to like do podcasts with people like yourself, Blake, 2 years ago before I ever stepped on a stage, it was like I'd see you guys on Instagram and I'm like, wow, like these guys look so impressive. So to now be able to like go to nationals and basically be on the same stage, like it's like a surreal feeling. So
you know what, it's funny because like I've come from that point where like when I was 24 and I was first starting, like there's people that are like in the amateur ranks that you like look at and you go, oh my God, this like such a great like level of bodybuilding in Canada. And then like it's been years, like Humberto's same thing, like it's been years of doing this and you kind of like establish yourself. And I don't necessarily, it's not a bad thing, but like as like a top amateur, you know what I mean? Because in the US, I think if you have that kind of like look and density or whatever, you can go to like 10 shows in the year and get it done. Up here, like there's always been like 2 shows, right? So, and it's always been the overall winner. So like when you see the kind of quality of the guys that do turn pro coming from here, it is quite astounding. Like they're ready for the pro stage, and that's been something that like I've changed my mindset on a lot, is like getting to that point where like now I look like, well, I think could stand on stage with pros, and like finally, after years and years, like, that could be the case, but it's taken a long time to get to this point.
Yeah, the US has definitely a greater number of pro qualifiers through the year and pro cards. I mean, yes, it's slightly relative to the population and the participation, of course, in shows, but yeah, you would see many examples in the States of people that they do their total debut, like first show, they look great, they qualify to the pro qualifying level, and they just keep just doing these pro qualifiers, because in a lot of those pro qualifiers you have top 2 per class turns pro, right? So it's like I don't want to say it's easier, but it's a little bit more likely that if you remain consistent and put that work, that it happens in the state because of the numbers of the number of opportunities that you have. Whereas in Canada, we have, 3 pro qualifiers, and it's pretty much just overall winners. That's it. So it's, I mean, if you really think about it, winning one of these overall titles, it's almost like a little bit more pride, because you really know you're the top of the top because you beat absolutely everyone, right? So I think that has to do a little bit with what you're mentioning, the level that Canada is bringing to the pro, just because of how much, like how harder it is, so to speak, to turn professional in a given category in Canada. The States has, of course, amazing level, but it's just there's so many more opportunities that in some instances, let's just be honest, you'll see a picture of someone that turned pro and you're like, that kind of looks like it would have been top 5, top 3 at one of the Canadian pro qualifiers, right? So
yeah, and it's like one of those things where like maybe you go to the Canadian Nationals and like, let's say you don't nail your peak, right? Like let's say like something happens where you're not like 100%, like that's it for the year. You're coming back next year, right? So like instead of like being like, okay, maybe next weekend I'll do the USAs, or then I'll do the North Americans, like you have a lot of opportunities to like maybe change your look. And I did one year, what was it now? 2018. I did 4 pro qualifiers, like back to back to back to back. I traveled all over the place and did them. And I found that like, as I went through them, I got better. Like some people, like it's maybe not the case, but I found that like you get to know your body so well when you're in that kind of condition, that like if you can just step on stage like week after week, you're more confident. You figured out the peak a little bit better, like how much water you need, et cetera, et cetera. And that was a lot of fun. Like I was like able to do a lot of shows, and that's kind of like what we do this thing for. So it would be nice, obviously, over time, if we can maybe get another one, maybe put one in like, out where you guys are, like out in Alberta or something like that, where, just a little bit more opportunity. Because when I was talking to Joe Seaman, like he had the same thing. Like he went, I think it was 2017, 2018, and then 2019, he finally got his card. Then he stepped on the pro stage the day after, and he finished 4th, like at a pro level show right after he won his card. So there's a lot of quality coming out of Canada. Might not have the same numbers as the US, obviously, but you can see it even at the Olympia level, right? Like there's a lot of guys that Canadian are awesome.
How many pro qualifiers have you done in total?
I've done 7.
7.
Yeah.
Okay. And the plan this year, do you have, in the event, of course, you're likely just focusing on the nationals right now, but in the event you have to do a pro qualifier, have you thought about other options out there that you could potentially do?
You know what? I've had this like thing where it's like, and I do this every year, but like I've just been manifesting like get the card at this show and then compete as a pro at the Toronto Pro in December. Like, nice. I mean, there's nothing stopping somebody from coming and beating me, but like if I have a different mindset, where I've always, flirted with if I don't get it here, I'll go here. But it's like, I think you just gotta put it all on there, and if you disappoint yourself, so be it, right? Like, it's just it's one of these times you got to strike gold and it's going to happen. And hopefully it's this time.
Yeah, that happens to me quite often as well. Like I have a show in mind and I'll talk to my wife. It's like, well, there's this other show too in the event. She's like, why are you focusing on other
I
shows?
know my
Just
wife does
focus
the
on this
same
one
thing.
show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You get the
Yeah.
same
So
thing. Yeah. Yeah. Be more
so
confident.
we need them to kind of like set us back on track mindset wise and that. And you know, it's funny because I think you're a great example of what I like in the external aspect, because you're humble in the external, but as you mentioned, you have to be very confident internally, but you don't really talk too much about, you know, you'll see a lot of guys being like, I already won, just watch me, you know, this is being a little bit too overconfident almost, which I understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to like put it out there, manifest it, but I think there's ways and sometimes they overdo it.
I think like to that point, like you just got to be, I'm realistic, right? Like I think I know coming into the show, like who's going to do it and like who, you know, could potentially, you know, who could potentially beat me. And I have an eye where like I'll look at someone and be like a good example is like Justin from out in Alberta, right? Like he tore his bicep. He has so much muscle maturity that like we would bring completely different looks, and he has like that dense, grainy, like almost like a bodybuilding look, but could be favored, and it has been favored in the past in Canadian shows. And I've got more of like, I don't want to call it a fresh look, but like more like, you know, maybe cleaner lines, et cetera, et cetera. He beats me in many areas, and then I think I beat him in other areas. So for me, like I would look at him and say like he's the guy to beat type thing. He tore his bicep. Really unfortunate. I was actually looking forward to competing against him because I never had the chance. But with him not competing, I know like there are a few other guys out there that have been putting the time in, kind of thing. But to your point too, Humberto, I see some young guys who are just like, this is my time and stuff like that. I'm just like, I'm not getting involved with any of that, but I'm just like, not yet, I'm young, man. Like, you know what I mean? Like, give it a few years and then we'll see. But
yeah, you gotta pay your
I
dues.
don't mind that mindset either, right? Like, I think I probably did that 3-4 years ago too. So it is what it is.
I think seeing that stuff's more interesting than anything, to be honest, right? Like you see it, it's entertaining. You see the long-winded posts or whatever, and it's like, oh, well, that's something, you know, like it catches your eye, but you kind of look at them and you're like, humble yourself.
You just gotta be a bit real, you just gotta be a bit realistic, right? Like yeah, I think you're setting yourself up a little bit for disappointment that way. If you really truly do believe that. But then I think sometimes a lot of it's up front, right? Guys are just putting like long-winded messages together, maybe to convince themselves or something. But
yeah, I think
I can't get into the mindset of that.
I see when I coach, and I've run into these types of people as well. What I try to do is I try to manage expectations. I try to manage with my clients. I try to manage even their mindset and their attitude. Like there's some people that are like that, in which, you know, they haven't really done much and they're like just talking and posting about it. So I do my best to politely kind of like bring them back to reality a little bit. Listen, you haven't really done that much. You look great. I'm not trying to bring you down, but at the same time, as you mentioned, you have to be realistic. Whereas at the same time, you have people that look amazing, their potential is limitless, and then they almost have to be brought up because they're too humble or too shy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's finding that that fine line between too confident and too humble and almost like not believing in yourself. That it almost makes me wonder if the coach sometimes has a little bit to do with them just going overboard with this, because you know they are their guidance in every single aspect, not only nutrition. Like if I see a guy acting like that, I would kind of like just have a conversation with him. It's like, listen, like you don't want to put yourself in a position in which you're gonna look silly if this doesn't really happen and go your way, right? So, and it also looks bad on me. So,
same thing could be said though for some coaches. Like without saying any names, there are some coaches out there who, you know, call people future Olympians, right? And they haven't even stepped on a stage yet. So when you see that, you're like, okay, you should probably relax a little bit, you know?
Yeah, sure. That happens a lot in the Yeah, in the fitness industry, it's something that is definitely, and there's a difference. Again, there's a difference, I think, between just manifesting and putting it out there, and just being almost like too much.
It's cocky versus confident, right? Like
Exactly.
there's definite levels. Like if like someone shows out of a regional and they look phenomenal and they win their class, and then they start saying like, oh, I'm gonna smash everyone at nationals, or like that's like if I win my pro card and I go all of a sudden on Instagram and I'll go like I'm gonna go to the Olympia at the Toronto Pro. Like I have like an expectation that I would do well at a pro show, but I'm not thinking I'm gonna crush everyone there and like just move up the ladder. There's no shortcuts. There's really no shortcuts, and I think I heard someone one time at the gym say like, once I like become a pro, then I'm gonna do X, Y, and Z, and I'm like, you gotta first become a pro, and like to
Mm-hmm.
someone who's been trying to do that for like a number of years, it's not easy at all. They don't give these things away, and like it's almost like disrespectful in the sense that like
Yeah.
you just assume you can do that without putting the effort and the time in. You're gonna find out pretty quick you're not gonna get there.
When you hear stuff like
Absolutely.
that, I think of people like Ron Partlow, who literally grinded for the better part of, what was it, like over 10 years to get his pro card. So when you hear stuff like that, like, it is extremely disrespectful to the guys who have done
Yes.
pro
Yes.
qualifier after pro qualifier, and for a surplus of years and all the sacrifices to finally get a card. So it's like, come on, man.
Like I think of like the guy who just started lifting and they're like, I'm gonna be a pro. And then there's guys like Dorian Hamilton who has like cannonball shoulders, looks like a comic book character, and he's an amateur. Like, I mean, he hasn't competed in a long time. I'm actually really excited for him to get back on stage. He's doing the national show and he hasn't competed in like 5 years. But there's guys with so much like tissue and like development and longevity. And then like there's somebody who's been working out for like 6 to 8 months and they're like, when I'm a pro kind of thing. But yeah, I know what you guys mean for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can't tell you how many times I've seen, and including myself, with personal experience, you win a provincial level or regional level show, that very often means very little at the pro qualifying, because again, you're going to be going against people that have consistently re-qualified and they've been knocking on the door of becoming a professional. And I get the excitement from, I just won that regional, you were the best at that show, absolutely. But the reality is that, one, Canada has very high level. Two, you never know who's going to show up. And that to me was super evident on the last show that I did. The last show that I did was the Toronto Pro Qualifier in 2019. That's the year that Kim won it. Literally, he came from the other side of the world. He came from all the way from Korea. He was a bodybuilder.
Yeah.
Right. He went, he switched from bodybuilding, because he had done bodybuilding for a while, came down to classic, and he was lights out. Like in the overall lineup, it was just him and everyone else. So literally,
he won the pro show. He won the pro show the day after.
Exactly. You know what I mean? Like he qualified. He went from amateur to qualifying to the Olympia within the same freaking day.
And that's the thing. That's the thing. There's no stopping someone like that from showing up, right? So like, if you're gonna think you're the best, like, there's a lot of people in the world that can show up and beat you. So yeah, to your point, like, you don't want to look like a jackass and say like pro card incoming and all that crap, because you never know.
Exactly. That right there is like the perfect example of like levels when it comes to competition. But just switching gears a little bit, because I do want to ask this. I know, of course, you go to Pure Muscle Fitness, you're tight with all the guys. How did the HD partnership come about? Because I know nowadays it's a bit more common for a supplement company to actually bring on like a high ranked amateur athlete, but before it was kind of unheard of. Like, I've heard of one other person, and it was Cody Drobot. So I'm just kind of curious, like, how it came about with you and Dorian and Noah.
Yeah, so I've known Dorian for since 2015, maybe a little bit earlier than that, just from the gym. Like, just he's from Burlington, so we're from the same city, and he actually coached me for the longest time. So we've been really pretty close for quite some time, and same with his brother and that whole kind of crew. So I had like a little bit of an inside with those guys, but to that point, like, I worked in the supplement industry myself. So I worked for Fusion Nutrition, and the makers of Purple K, and they're based out of like Mississauga here. So when that opportunity came up, like it was like a full-time position. It was a really good kind of corporate gig that I was working through. So at that point, HD Muscle was like just starting out, and they reached out to me. And obviously, with working at Fusion, I'm not going to be an HD athlete with the conflict and interest. So I went through the whole, rigmarole of like working through COVID and doing that and learning a lot about the industry. And that was, very insightful, and always kind of been like the corporate, like 9 to 5 type person. And it was just like a really, really great opportunity. So I learned a ton there. And then from there, I wanted to do some more stuff on my own, and to focus on like my coaching and to focus on my training and everything. So I just said, like, it was becoming a lot, and I just wanted to take a step back, wanted to do some different things with my life. So I told the owner there that I was going to be part of the go forward plan, and then I took some time, and then I reached out to Dorian not long after and said, like, if the opportunity is still there, I'd like to, do, a bit of a deal with you guys. And to me, like, the biggest thing was just the interest in his content. So like, they do such a good job of putting out like high quality YouTube videos and training stuff and all that. So that was, something I was interested in. So I'm actually shooting with them this Thursday to do some kind of like catch up about like the prep and leading into nationals, and then probably do something afterwards, when I'm done the show too. So that was that was sort of how I got hooked up with those guys.
That's huge, man. I love hearing like stories like that, honestly, because it's like the come up was there basically when he was your coach, and then it's like now a few years down the road, after the work experience in the industry, it's like reconnecting like that is just great to see.
Yeah, he's always been like a super like loyal guy too, and like takes care of like the people around him. He's done phenomenal with like just bodybuilding, like being a business, right? So he's someone that like I like to be around and like to bounce ideas off of, because he's got the gym, he's got the supplement line, he's selling gym equipment there, and he's really taken the entrepreneurial approach to bodybuilding, and it's pretty cool. So I wanted to definitely partner up with him and see what he can do with the brand, because there's still so much opportunity for those guys to grow. And they've already got the branding down. They have so many top awesome athletes in that, but they're just kind of starting, so it's exciting.
Their growth is insane. Yeah. Well, congratulations on that, Blake. That's absolutely huge, and I love seeing the partnership for sure. So kind of a fan of like Mike Van Wyck. Like I always watch like the HD videos, because it's always interesting to kind of just hear how he trains certain muscle groups or puts the guys through certain workouts in comparison to everybody else. It's always like a learning experience, especially as a coach, to see those things. So I'm looking forward to the content that you guys put out as well. So I guess the question I would have then, let's just say, for example, let's say you win the card at Canadian Nationals, you do Toronto Pro in December, your kid is going to be born shortly after, newly married. What does the next couple of years look like? Does it look like being a dad and focusing on coaching, or does it look like continuing to, compete?
I wish I had a good answer for that. Like my wife would like if I had a more solid answer than I'm about to give you, but like right now, man, like just because there's so much going on, and like I know Humberto, you know this too. Like when you're 5 weeks out, it's just like I literally think about the show nonstop, think about my training nonstop. Like there's really not much opportunity for me to plan like too far past that. And I think that's really I've done a good job of like kind of compartmentalizing my life, where like I'll focus on, one thing at a time, because it can be overwhelming with, 30 different moving pieces. And that was why, like, when I was driving, I was driving like over an hour back and forth to work, working like 8, 9 hour days that were like really, really slammed full of like stuff going on, and really, kind of high stress, to be honest, that it was like, I was just burning the candle at both ends for the longest time. Like it was like over 10 years, like in a 9 to 5 kind of desk job. And this is the first opportunity I've had where I'm able to take a step back and to really, really focus on like, everything to do with fitness and bodybuilding. And it's I'm very fortunate to be in a position where like I can do that, because I know most guys, like some guys work like crazy. Like I got a client, he works like 12-hour night shifts and stuff and like still gets it done. And it's doable, but like, man, is it a lot easier when you don't have those responsibilities too. So yeah, right now it's just the focus is on 5 weeks, and then after that I'm going to decide when I'm in the off season and I got a little bit more fruit into me, what it looks like after that. But I will keep competing for sure.
Right on. And I know, Humberto, you had a question about Patrick Tour, the coaching.
Well, I know you've been working with Patrick since I think it was last year, 2020. Was it, Blake?
Yeah, let me think. So I started with him. Yeah, it was 2020. So I was gonna do the I guess Canadian Nationals with him, and I started with him like 16 weeks out. So like
How do you
right
like
in the beginning.
how do you like working with him? I mean, I know what it is like to work with him, and I loved it. But I want to get your take on how do you consider his approach perhaps as different from other coaches that you've had before? What are the things that you've learned from him? How do you like working with him altogether?
Mm-hmm. So for me, like I've always been like, I was coached by Dorian, right? And then I was coached by
Mhm.
Pat. So their like methods are actually fairly similar. So it
Okay.
wasn't like a huge adjustment in terms of like nutrition, PEDs. The big change I would say would be the training. Like he's very like organized with how he wants you to perform sets. There's a lot of like intensifiers, like there's a lot of cluster sets, drop sets, time sets. I'm not really used to that. Before I was kind of just instinctually going in and like, I always push myself, but it wasn't as structured. So the training has been a big difference with Patrick. And then I would say honestly, just he is like, he's just a really nice, like caring guy. Like he really gives a shit about how you do. And like I feel that from him. So I think that like having that relationship, like um I don't think I would do well. Like I know there's a few coaches out there like who are just like they play like really hardball with you, right? Like you get
Mhm,
like
mhm.
no love from them. Like it's done to that.
Yep.
I need the like you look good, like everything's going well kind of thing. And he's great that way. So um I just think that he's a really good person, and every athlete he has looks sensational. And that was sort of like the bridge for me to from Dorian to him, because basically the reason that I made that change was Dorian was just starting out with the supplement business, and like he was so like he was spread thin, right? Like he had like 3 different businesses on the go. He was still coaching like Olympians and stuff like that. And we had a chat, and I just said like, if I wasn't to use you, like what would you be your thoughts on Patrick Tour? And then he was saying like, I think Pat's one of the best guys in the world, and like I think you do really well with him. So from that point, I reached out to Pat. Pat took me on, and yeah, it's been an awesome couple of years.
And that has a lot to say about Dorian as well, because a lot of coaches may take offense to that. They may act a certain way, like they'll be almost like mad at you because you're considering other options. But I think the real good coaches that care about you as not only as an athlete but also as a person, they just want the best for you regardless of
Mhm.
what they may be. They would of course prefer that it's under their guidance, but if it's not, like they're just, the fact that he even gave you that opinion and that little feedback about Tour, that's just, and that happens I think with also successful coaches, because some of them that may be a little bit insecure about their own abilities may get that defensive type
Mhm.
of attitude, I think. But and that's another thing that is very important, I think, for people to realize when they're looking for a coach. I think a lot of people get almost too carried away with the pictures that they see of their athletes, whatever the content the coach posts. It's also a matter of digging a little bit deeper to see whether you're compatible
Mhm.
perhaps with the coach, whether it's the approach or just the personalities, right? The personalities may not click, and that may be a little, you may be able to go through a prep, but there may be a better option in that regard for you to actually try a different approach and a different style of communication. Of course, at times the language barrier could be a thing, but Patrick's English is really good,
Mhm.
so that
Mhm.
there's not an issue there. So that's, I think, something that it's, again, most people especially if they're starting, they don't do, I think, enough of research to find out whether it just goes, it should go beyond the price, beyond what you see in social media. It should go a little bit farther than that. You know what? Maybe ask a little bit of questions regarding the things that are important to you, other than the actual just information that you're going to get, right?
Mm-hmm. No, I couldn't agree more. It's like, I think too, when you're first starting out, like it is helpful to have someone local that like maybe you know or you've had conversations with about like how X, Y, and Z work, because as you get further, like the plan is like from Pat, it's very detailed. Like if I was just to be starting out and I was to receive something like that, I'm not sure I could stick to it, to be honest, because it's just like there's supplements with every meal, like it's very like regimented and that. So it's like almost like, I'm not saying like when you start you need a beginner's plan, but like work your way through the system, especially before you're going to spend, you know, an exorbitant amount of money on like a guru, like one of these top guys. It's like maybe find somebody that's in your wheelhouse that you know and that you trust, and then once you've kind of established that with them, then it might be a good time to like seek out like an Aceto or a Tour or, you know, one of these big name guys. But yeah, I think a lot of people, they think like just is the coach, you know what I mean? Like it's just like, oh, okay, if I go with you know, Andrew Vu, I'm going to be shredded. It's like, well, you're the one doing the stepper and eating, you know, fish
That's
and
right.
broccoli. It's
Yeah.
not necessarily just the coach. So I think people they can learn a lot from different people and different methods, and I've been fortunate, you know, to learn from two of the great ones, and then I now have that, you know, info like with me, right? So it's a good investment too, but at the same time, yeah, I think if you're just starting out, then look for someone who's had good results, maybe at the lower levels before you go to like one of those like top guys.
Mhm. When you if you were to compare your previous prep, the one leading up to the Toronto Pro Qualifier last year that got canceled, and this prep for the nationals, are there any differences, whether it's on the mindset, whether it's on the training or the nutrition, that you can kind of compare the two against? And or basically the question I'm asking is, how are you guys primarily trying to become better from the last prep?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the major thing was the off season, right? Like I've been sucked into that like competing a million times kind of mentality, and like never really taking enough time to grow. And I think with COVID, like it was literally like Groundhog Day. Like I had access to a gym the whole time. And you know, without a whole ton of stuff going on, it was literally like wake up, eat, train, sleep. And I kind of went through that for a while. When I was in the off season, I got the heaviest, the biggest, the strongest I've ever been. Thankfully with very little like injuries, like minor stuff. And then I was able to progress a lot. And then once like we started coming back down, like it was like I had a full like setup with Pat. And I think that when people, again, this goes back to coaching, like when you're looking for a coach, like you should start with an off season. If you're in shape, you should start with an off season before you go into a prep, because like if you come to someone 12 weeks out, like you don't know how much they've been eating, their metabolism and all that. Like I was up to like, you know, like the 400 grams of rice per meal. Like Pat really feeds you. So I was like crushing food. I was like, you know, mid 240s with like pretty good condition. And then once I started tapering back down, like a few days, like right now, 2 days a week, I'm eating like 300 grams of rice per meal, like a friggin'
Nice.
bunch of oats, like 150 grams of oats in the morning. Like I'm eating, so it's good. But then like versus last year, I think I didn't have the same kind of like I didn't have the same kind of tissue. So it was like I really had to like starve, you know. And this year, like I'm still really hungry, but I'm eating like quite a bit more than I was last year going to that prep, just because I think I had a lot more body fat to lose. And this year, like I stayed a little bit more trim. My training has been really good, so it's been pulling a lot of calories off me. Being a little bit bigger, you burn more calories, so it's just a combination. But I think at the end of the day, it's just time, right? Like more time, like every year you get better. And that's why the best bodybuilders in the world are mid 30s, right? Like you don't develop that tissue unless you're like a genetic freak. Like there are guys like you think about Quinton, I think he's like 24, 23. Like there's obviously Chris
Wow.
Bumstead. Like those guys have like that grainy muscle maturity at a young age, but like 9.9 out of 10 guys don't have that. So it takes time. Like when I first started, like if I would to see myself like 5, 6 years ago, like I would think like I'm like string bean, you know what I mean? And now I'm still trying to chase that size, but it's like every year you chip away. And I think if you're consistent with it over time, like, you know, everybody can get better. And I'm still doing that myself.
And that's just it. I mean, people don't realize how much consistency and time and patience this requires. I think nowadays, many people are just expecting that pro card in the first go, the first attempt, the first year. And I think very often too, when they don't get it, because it's very unlikely that you get it the first time around. I mean, it can happen, but it's unlikely. And when they don't get it, it's just, they become so frustrated because that was their expectation and what they thought was the norm. That they just become so demotivated, and sometimes they quit. Like I didn't, like, this is what I tell people, I didn't even win my class until my sixth show. Like I was second, third many times. I won my class until my sixth show. I've done a total of 16 shows so far, and as long as there's improvement, that to me is what matters the most. You're trying to improve by as much as possible every single time. Now, obviously, the mix of competitors that you'll have at different shows, especially once you start doing pro qualifiers. Some pro qualifiers are like the Canadian Nationals, just Canada. Then you'll go, I believe you did one show in Bermuda. Was it 2019 or 2018?
Yeah, I did the Bahamas one. So that was the first time they did that like Caribbean show. And like I just thought that was the coolest idea ever. Cause like I took family, like my mom came down with my wife, and we stayed, like it was at the Atlantis, which is like such a nice resort, and you're in the best shape of your life. So I was just kind of thinking like, I thought it was a good opportunity to win my card, but at the same time, like after the show, like you're absolutely shredded on a beach. Like it was the only time in my life where like it was a ridiculous like kind of situation, but it was a lot of, I did that. So that was one of those 2018 shows. And then I went from the far extreme of being in the Bahamas, and then we flew the next week to Iceland, and I did the Iceland show.
Wow.
Yeah.
How was that show?
That show was so much fun too, because I had like no expectations of Iceland. I just like, this is going to sound bad, but I was like, who the fuck lives in Iceland? Like, I'm gonna get my card there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I got there, and I was like, holy shit, there's 17 guys in my class. So there was 17 guys in my class. I won my class there. And then it was one of those ones where like I really got let down at that one, because I had won the class, and then I was, you know, everyone's like, oh my God, like you're gonna get your card now. And then there was an older guy, a French guy, and he was short in the short class, and he just had that like really dry looking tissue, and he ended up winning the overall. And but yeah, no, the Iceland in general is just like such a cool place. Like we did there's like this like outdoor blue, they call it the Blue Lagoon. It's like a giant thermal spa. Like it's like natural, but it's like all like, you know, heated by volcanoes and stuff like that. And like the landscape there, it's like Lord of the Rings kind of stuff. Like anywhere you drive is just like gorgeous. And it's actually not far either. Like from Toronto, I think it was like a 4.5, 5 hour flight. Like it's on the way to like Europe, right? So like you kind of just go a little bit up and into the like, you know, the ocean there. And yeah, it's a really, really cool place. So I actually went back the year after and did it again.
2019, you did that show again?
Yeah. And it was the worst show of my life, because like I was just like, I had checked out. Like I did a show, I think it was like a month before. I think I did the Toronto show, and I won my class there. And then I had a bad mentality going into it. I thought, I tried to play the game where I was like, what's going to happen if I eat like 2 full chocolate cakes? You know what I mean? Like what's going to happen if I eat like 3,000 grams of carbs? Let's just see, kind of thing. And I went there with my dad, and I ended up, I think I finished 7th at that show. So it was the worst placing I've ever had. I was like super like wet on stage and like sweaty, and like, it was just like, I spilled so bad. So it was a good like learning opportunity, because in the back of my mind, I don't know if you guys have ever felt this way before, but I'm like, I always felt like I was flat. Like I always thought like, okay, like I think that, you know, the day after the show, like when you wake up and you're just like, you've eaten like 3 hamburgers and like 20 pounds of fries, and you just look crazy. I was like, let's try that. Like, let's see what happens with that on stage. But that's like a photo shoot look and not a competitive bodybuilding. Like I did not have the lines I needed. I looked like shit. So that was a good learning lesson, but not a good show for me.
Yeah, it's very interesting how, especially as you get deeper into a prep, you start to flirt with justification a little bit too much. You're like, well, I'm on track, even if the coach says, oh, you look great. Well, maybe I can afford to do this or that. Oh, no one's gonna know, but and I think even though no one knows, your subconscious starts to kind of like you know you're not at 100%. So then from there, I think it's a slippery slope towards just continuing down that road. I've been there multiple times. Actually, I was starting to slip last prep for the Toronto Pro Qualifier. My justification was that it was still the items in my diet, right? As I would still clean items, it's still in additional calories, even if it's rice and oatmeal, that is going to affect your look. And to me, my justification was that because the shows have been postponed so much, I almost started to feel like I just didn't really care. Like I had beaten my previous best according to what I thought it was. And I was like, you know what? I stopped caring about the show. Like it started to become about just finishing the prep for the sake of finishing it. Mm-hmm. And I think it was 11 days out where I like mentally checked out. And I'm not gonna lie, when the show got canceled, I was kind of glad because I knew I wasn't finishing as strong as I could have. Like, yeah, I looked fine and Patrick was happy with the look, but I knew it could have been a little bit better, a little bit harder. And that has nothing to do with Patrick's instruction. Like he's basically going based on what he sees in what I report, right? So it's tricky and it's especially interesting to see how you're able to mold your mindset and keep things under control. I don't know if you've ever coached yourself. I'm coaching myself for this prep. I've done it before, and both have advantages and disadvantages, I think. I find that I personally am a little bit more strict if I coach myself. That's just me so far, just because I have absolutely no one to blame. And it's just a comment of on my coaching as well. Because if I'm following my own instructions and I look like shit, then what is that going to say, when I step on stage looking like that, right? So that is the main reason. I learned a lot from Patrick last year, a lot. And I just kind of wanted to apply what I learned with my own knowledge. And I decided to kind of give it a go on my own. So far, things are going really well. A couple of hiccups, little minor injuries, my shoulder and a couple other things. But my show is going to be 4 weeks after you guys. So I'm going to go to the nationals. I'm not competing at the nationals, but I will be 4 weeks out then. So it's going to be definitely motivating seeing, the best in Canada before I fly to Mexico to do my own show.
Yeah, that Mexico show looks awesome. That's a really cool thing that you got set up there.
Well, I am promoting one show, which is September 25th in Cancun. That is a regional show. But then 3 weeks after that is the show that I'm going to be competing in, which is a pro qualifier in the North Mexico, the city of Monterrey. So that one is an international pro qualifier as well. So that is the one that I'm planning on doing as of right now. Hopefully things will happen right now. Most of Mexico is in orange zone, which is the one before red. So, that's why I'm starting to kind of, when I asked you about that Bahamas show, that's another option that I've kind of eyed a little bit. Just trying to be prepared. I'm trying not to think about other shows, but I also, at the same time, I need to be prepared in the event this one show doesn't happen. I do want to compete this.
Different time of, in the world, right? So you got to be thinking of those things.
It's kind of strange how it's like become the new norm now, eh?
Yeah, I know. Unfortunately.
Like literally needing a backup plan just in case, because the reality is like anything could happen. But in any case, Blake, we don't want to take too much of your time. We do want to say thank you very, very much for just making the time, coming on, hanging out with us. And I wanted to ask you, if you're not too busy after Canadian Nationals, if you'd like to come back on and just recap the show with us.
I'd love to. I would love to. I'm good anytime you guys want to chat, and it's gonna be fun. It might be a little bit crazy right after, but at some point we'll for sure link up, and hopefully I'll have my like little card or whatever you get.
Right on, man. Well, best of luck with the rest of prep, and we will see you in Toronto in, I guess, just over 4 weeks.
All right, guys. Look forward to that.
All right. Thank you, Blake. Have a great day.
All right, you too. All right, bye, guys.